Good morning and welcome to Literature Matters. I'm very sorry for the slight delay in starting, but we've had technical problems, but they're all sorted now. And Mike, who is here as our executive manager, he's sorted it all out for us today. Now, one day I'm going to get Mike on here to say hello to you. He's shaking his head again, but we'll sort that out as we go along. Thank you, Mike, for getting us going. Now, I just want to say that Beth isn't with us today. Beth is studying for her exams, so we won't get her back till June. Beth, if you're watching, we miss you and we look forward to you coming back. Good luck with your exams. So, before I start, I've got something really exciting to tell you about. This is a news flash. Nobody else, this is a scoop. I told you, Felixstowe TV works on the edge. Now, I'm sharing this with you for the first time. Last night in a pub, I can't divulge which pub, I was speaking to a farm worker, a local farm worker. Now, I can't divulge his name either. We do keep things here confidential. He was a little worse for wear, but he told me something fascinating. Did you know there's genetic engineering going on a farm, not somewhere around the Trimley area, I understand. Now, you are not going to believe this, and I promise you this is a first. He told me this. They are going to harvest very shortly something amazing. Now, hold on to yourself here. They're going to harvest spaghetti trees. I know, it sounds fantastic, but genetic engineering is a wonderful thing. Apparently it's the first orchard of spaghetti trees in the country, and they came to Suffolk and not far from Felixstowe. Well, I think that's something to be very proud of, because I can have fresh spaghetti picked in the morning and on my table by the evening. I think that's wonderful. Apparently the reason they picked here, because I understood the scientists looked all over the country, but they picked around here because of the freak weather. Did you know? I didn't know this. But we get the winds coming from the southern continent and they blow across apparently Felixstowe and this part of Suffolk. And with them they carry the aromas of the olive trees or olive groves, and they also have the garlic fields, and that brings all the aroma, and apparently spaghetti trees love it and it really makes them grow. Now, I know it's genetically engineered, but I'm assured by this worker that it's all organically grown. So it can't get any better than that. Now, you heard it first here on Felix Television. We're ahead of the game. We work on the edge. Yay. BBC, eat your heart out. I hope you enjoyed that. And before I start, I just want to say Happy April Fools for tomorrow. I just thought I'd try that one out. I don't know if you guessed it. I thought it was quite a good one. But I'm going to carry on now with what I normally do, which is look at words and sayings and things that we're used to, and just looking at how what they mean and what they are to us, because we use so many words that we don't even think about. Well, today I've got something that's I think quite interesting. The bowler hat. Now, where on earth did that come from? Well, apparently William and Thomas Bowler were hat makers, and a long time ago, I should think the landed gentry and anybody who rode horses from quite good families always rode their horses with top hats. Well, they kept getting their top hats knocked off by the branches they used to go under. So Thomas and William Bowler designed the bowler hat, so it was rounded, a bit like an early crash helmet, I suppose. And they adopted that, and so it was named after them, so it was called the bowler hat, which I think is really nice, and I think it's quite fantastic that they had a decent name. If they were called Ramsbottom, it wouldn't seem quite the same, would it? You wouldn't put a Ramsbottom on your head. So I think that's quite an apt name. By the same token, a hero of mine, somebody who I think is utterly wonderful, who should be revered above all other men, the man that made my life a lot easier, Thomas Crapper. Now, although he didn't invent the water closet, what he did was he modernised it and brought it to all our homes. And I, for one, am very grateful to him. And I think he should be honoured. But actually, his name it's a swear word, it's used in very derogatory terms, and a man who invented such a wonderful thing. So, what's in a name? A lot, apparently. Would you rather be called a bowler or a crapper? Actually, you should actually want to be called a crapper because he invented something wonderful. But I suspect you wouldn't quite want to be called that. So I thought that was quite interesting. And I'm going on to my word of the week. As I've said before, I do love a good word. And my word today is mellifluous. Fabulous word. Just rings round your mouth. Mellifluous. You couldn't actually say that word if you'd had a few sherries. So not an easy word to say. And it means sultry, beautiful, sweet tones. I think that's a lovely word. So I shall be finding reasons to use the word mellifluous this week. And perhaps I can bring that in. My guest today is Eric St John Foti. Good morning, Eric, and thank you for coming.
And thank you for all the fun so far.
And you said that in such a mellifluous way.
Oh, I did indeed. I learned from the great.
I want to say, you know Eric, I'm sure, because Eric has been here just recounting his life story with Mike Nimmy. I think you're up to episode 11?
No, I think it's 12 now.
Oh my goodness
Half hour,
me.
and we're only a fraction of the way through.
I know,
so
I
it's going to
can't
go on for a long time, I think.
Well, I brought you here today because Eric does everything. He's such a fascinating man. But I brought him here for his literal contribution. Is that all right?
Well, it's nearly got there. You nearly got there.
Now, Eric has written a book called, I'd like to put it up for you, The Foti Theory. Can you see that? I hope that's nice and clear. It's the answer to almost everything, which is a fabulous quote from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But first of all, Eric, I'd love to ask, why did you write it?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I think today we are in need of something far more than we realise. In the past, we've always had religions to hang on to. People have had handrails of religion, but that seems to have drifted away. Science has taken its place and technology, but people aren't fully aware of everything to do with it. So there are an awful lot of people who are wandering around a bit bemused because they don't know what it's all about.
Right.
Now, of course, everybody's read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and in that, as you know, this race of mice, they very intelligent mice, I might say, they created the world, or made the world, as a computer to find out the answer to the ultimate question, you know, what is everything, basically. And, of course, it came up with the answer 42, or their first computer came up with the answer 42. Then they created the Earth as another huge computer to find what 42 meant. And of course, ultimately, the Earth was destroyed just 2 days before it found the answer, and the whole book is about the same thing.
Right.
But basically, it triggered off something in my mind, and I realized, of course, that there is an answer to almost everything, and it's all to do with time and infinity, which people don't think about, and of course the Force, or as people have termed it all throughout the ages, as God.
I was going to
But
say.
that's a quick answer to what you said.
Yeah.
The reason I did it was because, A, I felt that people needed that handrail, And it's answered a question which has bemused a lot of people. And I've thought about it. Originally, I was trained for the church. I went to a seminary for 3 years or so, and I think I was brainwashed, mark you. But nevertheless, it gave me a great instinct. And then I learnt it all over again, and I realised that there must be something holding the world together, and there's more to it than just accepting ideas. You've got to understand it and realise our insignificance, and that there is some force which is far greater than us and which controls everything. And really that's what the Foti theory is all about, and why I wrote it.
Wonderful. Does it conflict, because there's so many different religions, does it conflict with all the different religions there are out there?
No, this is one of the joys of it, because if you read the Foti theory, which I hope you will do, or you have done,
I have.
what I say is lay your religious beliefs to one side, because it opens your mind, and then you will find that it actually confirms your religious beliefs, and that everybody is right. Now that sounds an enormous step to take, that everybody can be right, but it is so, and this is where the conflict of time and infinity. In time, there's a beginning and end to everything, and in infinity, it's an eternal present. But this means, we'll talk about it in a minute, I'm sure, this means that everything is possible, and this is one of the joys of knowing this, and it gives an answer to people, because why do the Muslims get into conflict with Christians and other religions? It seems such a shame when they're all really in their own universe or their own parallel dimension entirely correct.
Wow.
So it's a lovely theory, and there's a lot of force to it.
Well, can we start with the force, because we've got the force, time and infinity. The force. I tell you what I really loved in the book, the analogy about the wristwatch. But I'd love you to just mention that, because that really triggered something in my head.
Well, the wristwatch thing which I put in was, people say, where there's the power of this force or God or whatever it is, and we don't realise how amazing everything is that is around us. If you look at your wristwatch, it's pretty amazing, and if you look at it, anybody who said to you that just happened, you'd say they were a fool. Anybody would, because it's obviously not just happened. It couldn't just evolve by itself. Somebody's had to design it, somebody's had to make it work, somebody's had to have the original concept of it, and then the machining and getting it to work correctly. It's not something which can just happen. And unfortunately, people are not aware of that. When you look at the wristwatch, I haven't got mine on today, so I can't show it to you, but if you look at your hand, now your hand is far more complicated than the wristwatch, because number one, it's got so many different movements in it that scientists haven't been able to duplicate them. When they were trying to deal with radioactive materials, they had to make robot hands to get it, and they were unable to replicate the movements of the hand.
Wow.
It's covered with a material which is not only protective, it protects it, but it absorbs as well. It's self-repairing. If you break it, it repairs itself. Your wristwatch doesn't do that.
No.
So it's absolutely amazing. Yet we can quite happily say that that evolved, and yet it's impossible to make something as complicated as a wristwatch. So you can see one of the ideas that I had there to prove that there was something, some force there which has, how shall I say, been responsible for that hand in the same way as somebody must have been responsible for that wristwatch.
Do you know, that just rang so many bells. That's a wonderful way of putting it. I think you're a genius to do that,
it's very kind
put
of
it
you.
like that.
I've really stated the obvious, because you see, we forget these things. We are a bit like, I think it's in the book there, it's a bit like a group of intelligent ants looking at a television set. Now, they think they can understand it, they think the people are talking to them, and they think they know it all. But they can have no conception whatever of what's going on inside the television set, or that there's a studio somewhere producing what's coming out over the television set.
Right.
They're in a completely different dimension than what's going on, yet they think they know it all. Now, we're in exactly the same position. If we go out and look at the stars and the sky and the sun and the ocean, it's so amazing, it's hardly true. And the best, and once again it's in the book, the best example I've got of this is if you take a piece of paper, tear it up, throw it on the floor, and mark the position where each piece falls.
Right.
That's easy enough, isn't it?
I can do that.
You can do that, that's good. But then, if you pick them all up again, what are the odds that you could throw them again and that each piece will fall in exactly the same place every time you throw it?
It won't.
It's virtually impossible,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And not all our science and technology, our greatest minds and thinkers could make it so that every time you threw those pieces of paper on the floor, they'd fall in exactly the same place.
Wow.
It's obvious, isn't it?
Yes.
And yet we
Yes.
look up at the sky, at the night sky, and you see the stars. These aren't pieces of paper. These are vast planets and vast pieces of rock or whatever it is floating through the sky, and yet they are in exactly the same place every night. We can tell you where they're going to be in 100 years' time. We know where they were 50 years ago. So something must be controlling that, and that isn't something which is just, how shall I say, some force without any knowledge. It's some very knowledgeable thing, far beyond our concept of knowledge. And so this is where we're getting to about the force.
Yeah.
And in the past, it's always been God. It's been referred to as God. But of course, we've got this concept of this old man in the sky ruling everything, and it's not. God must be a force which is controlling everything. And so this is the step, you know, the road along which this book tries to take you.
Fantastic. I could go on more about the force, but I'm looking at our time because we've still got time.
Oh, that's good.
We've got time and infinity to do now.
Oh, my
I mean,
goodness gracious me.
That's a huge thing. I love the, you had the ruler
Oh,
about
yes,
time.
yes,
That's
yes,
I
yes.
love your analogies because I understand it. It
Well-
just makes it very easy to understand. And
Well,
make
you see,
think.
I didn't realise time had gone on so quickly.
I know.
I've talked too much.
No,
I'm
you
sorry.
don't talk to me.
I'm
You
sorry.
carry on.
But you see, the problem is time, everything has got a beginning and an end to it.
Yes.
Everything's got substance. Everything is, you know, it's part of something we understand. We understand time. Time goes by a second at a time. It's this second that counts. You can't change what's happened yesterday. This second is the one that counts, and we can't know what's going to happen in a moment's time. We could all be devastated in a couple of minutes' time, or we could be dead tomorrow, any one of us.
Right.
So this second is the only second that counts in time. Now, in infinity, this is an eternal presence where there is no time. And so it's very difficult to conceive this, and I think the best way of conceiving it is to think of infinity as the vast open space, and then a bubble within that infinity, which is time. So everything within that bubble has got a beginning and an end, but outside of that bubble is infinity.
Wow.
And you see, it's getting that because they're contradictory, because one's got substance, one's got beginning and end, and one hasn't. There's no beginning, no end, and it's a very difficult subject to talk about and sort of summarise in a few moments.
I know.
But the whole point is that if you've got them, they're contradictory, yet they are existing together simultaneously. And one of the best examples to illustrate this was a Jesuit priest told me many years ago. He said, imagine a muddy old pool at the bottom of a farmyard, and he said in that there are all these worms and things and scurrying around, living their lives, and then every so often they rise to the surface of this muddy water and they disappear. And he said, they all worry and they think, oh, he's gone, this is our life, what's happened? One day this happened to one of these little worms. He came to the surface and he turned into a butterfly, and he flew about in the sunshine. And he looked down at this muddy pool And he thought, look at all my brethren down there, thinking how wonderful it is down there. But this is the real life.
Oh.
And so if you think of that muddy pool as time, and coming out of it, you're coming into infinity, that's the best concept you've got of getting the two things into perspective.
Is that death? Are you talking about death?
Well, this is our concept of death,
Our
because
concept,
you see, when we pass from time to infinity, that is our concept of death. We, in effect, disappear. You see, in you, you have got time and infinity both combined. You can remember things when you were 10 years old, yet you've got a completely different body. You haven't got the same body as you had at the age of 10, have you?
No.
And it's a completely different being, and yet you can remember all those things. That is the infinite part of you, that's the spiritual side of you, or the part from infinity. You see, there can be no solid things in infinity, because to be solid, you've got to have substance, you've got to have beginning and end, which you've got with your body.
Yes.
But the spirit is eternity, it's the infinite. Now, if you can conceive this, you're halfway home and dry, because this is where the whole crux of the matter comes in. Because if you go from time to infinity, you're like the butterfly which come up from the dirty water and you're flying around in the real world, and it's in that real world which is infinity. Now, in infinity, there's no beginning and no end.
Right.
In time, there is. And you see, unfortunately, in time, we're all living in our own little universes. And you can't see the same universe that I see, unfortunately. We can both be looking at the same thing, but we can have a completely different outlook. In fact, the police, if they take statements from people, something's happened, if they find that they're similar, they immediately investigate, because they know that correct how shall I say, views on a subject, they normally always vary.
Yes.
Because everybody sees it from a different angle. You see, you're seeing something differently from I. When I look round this room, I don't see what you see.
No, right.
Unfortunately, because a different viewpoint, different everything. And so in consequence, we've got to remember that in infinity, everything is possible. There's no beginning, no end, no time. In time, we're limited to this second. And that is why it confirms, and there must be something holding all of this together.
Yes.
And in time, we obviously have our great philosophers who've given us wonderful answers. We've got religion, which has given us wonderful answers. And they're all possible in infinity, and they're all possible in time. And this is why the good Muslim can be entirely correct, because in infinity it must be possible, because you've heard of the monkey theory, I'm sure. If a
Please tell us.
if a group of monkeys, they say, sat at typewriters, can't type, you know, they're just playing around. If there was an infinite number of things that they do, eventually they would turn out all the works of Shakespeare.
Really?
Well, you can see it, because if you have to take every letter in every book and have how shall I say, the whole alphabet in every difficult combination for every letter. Well, if you do that in an infinite number of times all the way through the works of Shakespeare, the mind boggles, you know, even to do it. But eventually they would produce, they must do, because that combination is one of the combinations. So everything is possible in infinity. But in time, we're only aware of the one possibility that we are aware of at that moment. And of course, this raises all sorts of problems, because in infinity, everything has existed forever. Now, if you imagine, as you talked about the ruler, if you take a ruler, at the beginning it's where you're born, at the end is where you die.
Right.
You go along that road a little tiny step at a time, don't you?
Yes.
You're only aware about, you're about here, right at the beginning of it.
Oh, bless.
But I'm right here at the end. But if you take that, you're aware of what's going on at this moment.
Right.
But in infinity, somebody in infinity looking at that ruler sees the whole lot. So they can see you being born, they can see you dying, and they see every step in between, all simultaneously.
Is this do you go with the concept of reincarnation when you're in infinity? I mean, is it circular?
Well, no, you see, the whole thing is reincarnation, everything is possible. And so you have probably lived the life of every single person who has ever existed. You may not have done, it just depends on your dimension, your belief, but in infinity, everything has happened. I remind you of the ants looking at the television set. We don't know, we can't conceive.
Right.
And you see, even coming back to good and evil, we've got different concepts. There are tribes in Africa, they used to believe that when somebody got old, that person they had to take their parents out into the jungle and leave them there to be eaten by the wild animals.
Goodness.
Now, some of these people apparently didn't want to do that. So they felt as though they were doing evil if they didn't take their parents out. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the old saying, evil is in the eye of the beholder, there's a lot to be said for it. It's what you believe and what you've been brought up to believe. I think good and evil is rather like negative and positive. And you see, once again, you come back to this principle of infinity and time. I think there's evil in time, but in infinity, what is it? How do we know? We can't tell. It's very difficult. And this is what it's all about, you know, in effect. I think it's a bit like electricity. You see, if you plug in your appliances correctly, you get light, you get heat, you get everything you want. But if you plug in incorrectly, you get sparks and explosions and what's it? And that is, in effect, what good and evil is. It's our misuse of the power of the force.
What a good analogy that is. I understand that one as well.
You do? Oh,
fantastic.
good.
You put it so... Oh, gosh, the time's just gone. We could talk for ages, and I could listen for ages. I don't know about you. But I have read the book. I will read it again. It's not something that you read just once. It's full of wonderful, wonderful ideas. And it's very uplifting, I have to say. It's a wonderful, wonderful concept. But if I wanted to buy one, how would I get hold of one?
Well, at the present moment, these ones that we've got here
show you
are proof copies, and we're having the proper ones printed. But if any of our viewers or listeners want a copy, they can very happy to come to the studio or come into the precinct, the radio station in the, you know, by the co-op.
Yes.
And if they can get one there free of charge if they make a small donation towards our funds.
Oh, that's
So
very kind.
they can have those. But we're
Yes.
having a new proper edition printed with a hardcover, and that will of course go on sale in the normal way. Now this was done originally sealed.
Right.
So that what we didn't want was people just picking in little bits. But we're not going to seal the final copy, because what we're going to recommend is that people don't just read it once, they read it over and over again until they grasp it.
Yes, I found that. I'm on my third read
Oh,
now,
you are?
and I'm
That's
still
good.
trying to grasp, because it's beautiful as well. It's
Well,
very
I think it
uplifting.
gives the answer to almost everything.
Almost everything.
Almost everything.
I think on that wonderful note, I must say thank you so much to Eric for coming in today. I think it's utterly fascinating. And if you've got any questions or you'd like to know more, please go on to the Felix Stowe TV website. You'll find an email address. Send us any questions that you may have. We would love to hear from you. It's a literary literary program. I'm really good at words, aren't I? On a literary program, and we'd love to hear from you and see what we can do together. But thank you so much for viewing today, and have a good day. Thank you. Bye bye.